Welcome into a brand new 300 yards to unknown. I'm Rick Gehman coming to you from Blue Wire Studios at the Wynn Las Vegas with a new kind of concept, new kind of idea, something I've been thinking about for a long time. And I said, if I'm going to do something different, I got to find someone I can trust. So let me bring in CBS Sports golf writer, author of Normal Sport, my buddy, Kyle Porter. KP, welcome in. Thank you for doing this.
Well, I'm glad you, it's scary that you feel like you can trust me because there's no telling what I'm going to say today about one of my favorite topics in all of sports. But yeah, listen, we were talking off air, I think people see this come through whenever we're live and doing these shows. We get to talk about this stuff for 6 hours. We're limited to 1 or 30 minutes or 15 minutes or whatever, but it's super fun. So I always enjoy doing this and always enjoy chatting with you.
Yeah, I was going to have a couple of like appetizers to get in before this, but I think we need all the time that we can get. So I'll unveil the topic in a second, but I was thinking about it as I was driving in here. Normal Sport, KP, I think it's the only book I've actually read in like at least like 3 years, which is probably says something about about me and a problem that I have in my own life. But like that's what it took. It took for you to write a book about golf and the actual insanity that is our sport for me to actually open up a book and flip through it.
Well, and apparently you said you like read it
twice,
multiple times.
I read it twice on vacation. I think I read it once when we got back. So I think I'm 3 deep.
So that counts as 3 books. Yeah, that might be more on you than it is on anybody else. But no, I appreciate you saying that. I think it's interesting because since I wrote the book last fall and into the winter, and I didn't know this would happen. I thought it might, but it's kind of caught on as like people will send me Normal Sport screenshots all the time or videos or whatever. And so it's almost become a little bit of the part of the golf Twitter lexicon where I got a screenshot today. I didn't see it, but Max Homa is playing in front of a guy that looks like ZZ Top, and he's got this beard like down to his belly button. And it just looks like, he's got this weird, like Max has this weird shirt on that looks like a what's the thing that when you stare at it, you like an illusion? Or
one of those puzzles where you try to cross your eyes.
Yes. What is that?
Hold on, I'll Google it. Puzzle.
But anyway, the whole thing is just you people send me that stuff all the time now, and it's super fun. I think it makes this stuff that we do on a daily basis, which can get repetitive and look the same. People, I don't know if people say this to you, but people are like, oh, golf, that's kind of boring. And you're like, I understand why you're saying that, but also like we amuse ourselves by finding these little goofy things within the sport that make it, to me, super entertaining. So do people say that to you also?
Yeah, but it's the more you know, the more entertaining it becomes, because then you can reference, oh, like Joel Damon's playing with Sung Kang again. Like, oh boy, here we go. Like, you know what I mean? Yes. Like the more you know, the more fun it is.
Yeah, and that's probably true in any industry that gets covered or that you're into. But yeah, connecting the dots, I think it's something that in this kind of media era you have to be good at, because we don't have a lot of the access that people that covered golf 60 years ago had. I just read a book it's actually somewhere behind me, called Arnie by Tom Callahan. And the access that he had and that a lot of those older writers had to not just players but superstars was unbelievable. And I think that if that's not going to be the case going forward, and I think a lot of players' agents have made sure that it's not going to be the case, right, then when you can connect the dots, when you can we have to be observationists, right? And I think that is it requires a lot of effort, but it's also a skill that you kind of develop over time. And I think that's part of what makes it fun.
A magic eye, KP, is that what you would call it? A magic eye. The official name, auto stereogram.
Like I think Max Homa's shirt, if you cross your eyes when you're looking at it, it might show Harry Higgs lifting his shirt up when you look at it too closely.
That's so good. All right, let's jump into this. So the whole idea. So what I wanted to do is I thought there was maybe not a need for this, but I thought there would be a desire to like spend too much time covering one thing, Kyle. It might be a shot, a single shot. It might be a single tournament, a single hole played, a single golfer, a single seat, like just something to say, holy crap, we're going to deep dive this and see what comes out. And I thought it was very natural to start with one Jordan Alexander Spieth and just ride the roller coaster with you. Why did I choose you for Spieth? Why is this? Why are you so closely associated with this guy?
Alexander the Great. I mean, listen, like everything on golf Twitter is at least a little bit of a bit, at least from my end. And so it's fun to lean into the, like, I love like everything that Spieth does, and I love riding the roller coaster with him. I've actually got a picture behind me of him.
Yeah, I see it.
On a roller coaster, which is part of the normal sport thing. But I think he is compelling because, and I think there's a couple of guys in the post-Tiger era that are compelling because they're doing pretty historic things that don't seem historic because of what Tiger did, right? So you win the Masters at 21, you win 3 majors by 25, and people are like, nah, I've seen that. I saw that like 10 years ago. I saw that 15 years ago. And you're like, no, you don't understand what's happening here. And so part of me feels compelled to like kind of scream this from the rooftops. But then I think the other part of me is he is for some reason, and I struggle to explain this because I don't totally know what the reason is. But there's 3 or 4 guys in the sport, and this is true in all sports, that are just magnetic, right? Steph Curry is amazing at basketball, just objectively, but he's also magnetic in a way that I don't know what that is. But there's a magnetism to Spieth that I think it's something that Phil had. Obviously, Tiger has it.
Yeah,
I think Rory has it, but you get only 2, 3, 4 guys in a generation that have it. And I don't know what words to use to explain it, but you can't not be compelled by them, whether you like them or not.
right.
You're always compelled. And I think that is something that Spieth has that not everybody else has.
Yeah, it's a 2-part recipe. You've got the historic angle, which other guys have been on similar, like Brooks Koepka has done historic things, but Brooks Koepka doesn't make me feel the way Jordan Spieth makes me feel. And Jordan Spieth, I don't know. He's human, right? Like if he hits a bad shot or does something stupid, he just tells you he does something stupid. So there's a humanization to Jordan Spieth, and he's had the fact that we can even describe the career as the roller coaster, and we'll go through it. Like it's. Man, the highs are high, the lows are low. And yeah, even if you don't like it, he invokes a reaction from you every single time he swings a golf club.
He does. And I think I'm glad you brought up the human side. He did a great interview with, No Lane Up last year, where he talked about how, because Chris Solomon, who interviewed him, was like, why are you so obsessed with this? Like, you've made $1 billion. Like you're not required to like grind like you are. This was I guess right after he won the Texas Open and kind of emerged from the wilderness. And Spieth said, like, listen, money can become such a crutch when you're in my position, and I just love the game, and I love being competitive, and I want to be great. And I felt like that was such a in a weird way, like a relatable answer, because he was kind of saying like, I don't like, the money is the money, but I don't really like think about it in a way that I think a lot of us believe that we would think about it if we were in that position. And so it's almost like he's, I mean, the one of us gif that gets thrown around on Twitter. It feels like he plays like us a lot of times. And then I think there are often times that he he talks like we hope that we would as well.
Right.
And I think him and Rory have both done a really good job from a young age of just being. So we talk to my wife and I talk to our kids all the time about being wise and being curious. And I think both of those guys embody like a curiosity about golf and about life, but also a wisdom that is beyond how old they are. And Spieth has always done that. I think he's always been great at it. So there's just a lot there that I don't even remember what your question was, but there's a lot there that I think is incredibly compelling. Obviously from a golf standpoint, because you're making 8s and 2s and you're all over the planet, but also from just like being a human standpoint as well.
There's seemingly a fine line between wisdom and curiosity, isn't there, Kyle? I mean, like I assume the way that you angle that is like, yeah, like it's good to have wisdom, right? Know what you know, but also continue to try to learn, continue to be curious about things that can offer different perspectives or different points of view, right?
Well, I think they feed into each other. So I think curiosity leads to wisdom, because not everything that you're curious about you're going to add to your arsenal, to your repertoire. And I think that's where I actually think, and maybe Spieth has gotten into a little bit of trouble there. I think Rory's been really good about, for the most part, he's a curious person even about golf, but he's stayed with the same coach. Spieth has as well, and kind of done the same stuff that got him to where he is. But you're right. Like my high school baseball coach used to say this, like he used to kind of instruct us, like, you need to go watch a ton of guys and take what you like and kind of form your own swing or your own, pitching repertoire or whatever. And so, yeah, that's the encouragement, like for me to our kids. And I think that those are my favorite athletes that are curious, but also wise about what they kind of add to how they continue to progress and not go down a path that maybe they shouldn't go down, especially in golf. We've seen guys do that all the time. Martin Keimer comes to mind, different guys like that are curious, but maybe not as wise, and that leads to some bad places.
You mentioned kind of how long Jordan Spieth has been doing this. I always forget how good he was, like as a junior player and in college, because it doesn't look like the guys that we see in the college stuff now or in the junior stuff now, who they all just have like the purest swings in the world. And Spieth's always had that like chicken wing little thing that he does, and it just like never looked as pretty. He was an unbelievably accomplished junior player, was awesome at Texas the year that he was there. That to me generally never even gets lumped into a lot of the stuff that Spieth does, just because there's so much stuff to talk about as a professional and all the great successes that he had almost immediately on tour. But he's an unbelievably accomplished junior player.
Do you think some of it is also because it didn't, like when I think about Collin Morikawa's junior career, it looked great, right? It looked, you watch it and you're like, oh, that's a pro.
Yep.
And when you watch Spieth,
no one said that on 13-year-old Jordan Spieth.
Yeah, like I don't know, like he's good, I guess. But I mean, I'm kind of joking, but I think that plays into, I think, why it doesn't get talked about as much. Do you agree?
For sure. And he's said plenty of times, like when he was growing up, like obviously he went to the range, but what they did for practice was just play. He just played. And I feel like some of these guys now that have, okay, I've got a simulator and a driving range and a launch monitor, and I've got cameras, and I'm going to look like Collin Morikawa when I swing a golf club, or I'm going to look like Adam Scott. Jordan Spieth was like, I'm just going to put the ball in the cup. Like, I'm just going to go do that instead of grinding on the range. And he got very, very good at putting the ball in the cup.
Yeah, and I think that's why it's a little bit discouraging to hear him talk about having like 5 different swing thoughts at the same time, like all these different things where you're like, man, is that, and granted, like, I didn't know him when he was 17. He probably was developing a swing, and like it's not like he's not dumb as it relates to the swing. But I do think that's a little bit, and I actually think Scheffler's like that a little bit too, Scotty Scheffler, where it doesn't look, maybe it's a Texas thing, it doesn't look great, but he just scores, and that's such an art. Like it's such a, I don't mean to sound like a 80-year-old, but that's like how Like, would I rather watch Colin Morikawa or Rory McIlroy swing rather than Spieth? For sure. Like, if we're on the range, I'm not posting up behind Spieth. I'm posting up behind Brooks Koepka, Rory, whoever. But I love, like, and I think that, like, it sometimes gets framed as like, oh, Spieth, the underdog, because like because it doesn't look great. You're like, what? I don't know. Like, that seems like a little bit of a stretch, considering he won, as you pointed out, 2 U.S. Junior AMs, Walker Cup, all this different stuff.
Right.
I remember, I don't know if you were covering golf at the time. It was like one of my first years covering golf, and he played in the Byron Nelson as a 16-year-old.
Yeah, I was just
remember
a
I was
fan. I remember it as a fan. Not like.
And I remember being in Dallas. I still live in Dallas, but being in Dallas, and everybody was freaking out about, oh, there's this 16-year-old playing in the Byron Nelson. And at the time I was like, oh, that's cool. Like, that's a fun story. And little did I know I'd have a poster of him, behind me on a podcast with you like 10 years later or whatever. I guess it was 12 years later. So yeah, he's always been great, but I think in a weird way, he's also kind of always been undervalued and underrated. I think if you go back, like, him and JT obviously always get compared together because they were the same age and did all the same stuff growing up. And I think if you asked anybody along the way, like, who's the guy out of these guys, people would have said JT. And I've talked to people that covered them at that age when they were 16, 18, 20, and it was always JT. Not that Spieth was bad, but he just wasn't thought of as like can't miss, which, I mean, he was thought of as like he's going to be really good, but not like generationally good.
If I asked you that right now, you still might say JT, right? Like, if you ask someone Spieth or JT every year for the last 15 years, there might have been like a 3.5 year stretch in which you said Jordan Spieth, but for the most part, you would have said Justin Thomas, which is crazy.
Yeah, and they've had. I mean, Spieth is just objectively so far had the better career.
It's not even really close. Quite honestly, I mean, the major championships.
It's getting closer.
It's getting closer
because JT passed him in wins, but the majors, yeah, it's. And again, we did do a podcast about this, but like, how much do you value majors over consistency? There's just I was thinking about this yesterday actually, because Andy Johnson of the Fried Egg came out with like this kind of this formula for evaluating players.
Okay, I haven't looked at it yet, but I have it bookmarked. So tell me about it.
Yeah, it's great. It's compelling. I disagreed with some of his point system, but it's like a cool way to designate who's been the best player of the last 5 years or 10 years or whatever. And I was thinking about how golf is almost like, remember the old college football, like when they decided the national champion based
like
on the bowls,
the BCS or whatever, or like the
even
calculator.
Even like when it was like, oh, well, these teams tied in the Sugar Bowl, so the Orange Bowl champion who went 10-3 but played this they're the national champion. You're like, I don't understand any of that.
Yes.
But golf is a little bit like that in that you can make an argument. Like, there's so many different arguments to be had when everything's like clean and clear cut, like the NFL or NBA playoffs. You can have arguments, but they're not as interesting because it's like, I don't know, the Warriors won 16 playoff games and lost 2. What do you want me to like argue against,
Right.
But in golf, because guys don't play every event, because majors are like valued differently than other events, but they're also during the regular season. Like, there's just so many arguments to make. And I think it makes our job more fun because we can sit here for an hour and I can argue anything, any which way, and hopefully make you believe me.
Yeah, I can't necessarily prove you wrong. I can say you're wrong,
right?
But I can't prove it. Well, it happened quickly when he got on tour, KP. Right? Obviously, 18th start, he goes out, he wins the John Deere Classic, and then that kind of like kicks off rocket ship Jordan Spieth, which is 14 wins worldwide from 2013 to 2017. He becomes the #1 player in the world. He wins 3 major championships during that stretch. He has like one of the best seasons ever recorded on the PGA Tour. This is just like peak Jordan Spieth. I assume I'm trying to rewind to how I would have felt at the time, and I'm trying to tap into how you would have felt at the time. Is it just like, this is never going to end? This guy's going to win 10 major championships. Like, what was the sentiment as he's in the middle of this run that is fairly historic?
Yeah, I thought it was I thought it was really interesting, even the way he started, because he was 19 in 2013, I think. Like when he won the John Deere.
Yeah, so he was
I think
born
he was
in
19.
July of 93. So if the John Deere was before July, he would have been 19.
Yeah, so it was I think 2 weeks later he turned 20, because remember he went to the Open Championship that year right after winning the John Deere. And even earlier than that, he earned his card. I think he locked up special temporary at what is now the Valspar, what was then the Tampa Bay Championship.
Yeah, he rattled off a bunch of top tens like very early.
Yeah, he was like playing on the Corn Ferry, but he was getting exemptions, and he finished T7 at Valspar. And then I remember the John Deere win, he kind of like thinned that bunker shot to hole out on 18.
Yeah.
And I think that was that to win it or to get in a playoff? I can't remember.
It had to be to win it.
It was to get in a playoff. He beat Zach Johnson, David Hearn. He beat Zach Johnson and David Hearn in a playoff.
What was didn't he do? He might have did that to Daniel Berger at another event where he had the same bunker shot, like either on 18 and then in the playoff. Maybe that's what I'm confusing it with.
Yeah. Yeah. But he like almost bladed that shot out of the bunker. And I guess my point there is, and we talk about this all the time, but the margins of like, what if that ball, I think there's water on 18 at John Deere. What if that ball rolls into the water and he finishes T8? Right. Does he still win 3 majors from 2015 to 2017? Maybe, but maybe not. And so there's so many things that have to go your way. And obviously he earned it that year, but I was really compelled. I think again, this goes back to Tiger, but a 19-year-old winning on the tour, I remember that being like, to me, that was a massive deal. Because it doesn't happen. Joaquin Neiman have some success. We've seen Matthew Wolff have some success, but it just seemed different. He was so mature, he was so good, and he was so young that I thought it was extraordinarily compelling at the time.
Yeah. So like, who is 19 right now on tour?
I don't think anybody.
I was gonna say I'm like looking through and I can't find anybody. So already that would because I was gonna say, imagine if so-and-so went out and won, 18 starts in as a 19-year-old, and how we would feel about that. That scenario might not even play out because it's not going to play out because as of right now, there's not a chance for it to play out. So
right.
It in theory could never happen again. It might, it probably will. These guys are getting younger, they're getting better, all that stuff. But there is not a comp to that if we wanted to put it in present day PGA Tour terms.
It almost felt like I just read Bob Herrick's Tiger and Phil book, which was really, really good and interesting. And Phil won the Tucson event when he was in college. He was famously the last amateur to win a PGA Tour event.
Right.
But I think he was still older than I think it was close. I think he was 20 when he won it. And that's almost what it felt like because I think we're like, oh, this guy should still be in college. Well, there's a difference between being like 22 or 23 and you should still be in college and being 19.
Right.
Like 19 is crazy. Like you're barely out of high school, and I remember talking to Jonathan Wall, who covers equipment for a bunch of different places, PGAtour.com.
What a great niche that is, right? Like, be the equipment guy. I always tell people, like, just be great at like one thing. I'm the equipment guy and I'm awesome at it. Love that.
Well, he is awesome at it, and guys don't mind, like they love to talk about their equipment.
Yeah.
And so it's almost like, and he does a great job beside that, but like if there's one thing they do want to talk about, it's their driver, their, whatever.
And you have the built-in, like, well, the reps are going to want to talk to you about what new club so-and-so is using this week. So you have like a built-in, like that side of it. So yeah, he does a great job. Sorry. to derail.
But I remember him talking to me one time about how he was sitting next to Spieth on a flight. This was early on when he was like 19 or 20. And Spieth, because Jonathan lives in Dallas also. Obviously, Spieth lives here. We don't hang out on the weekends, but we all live pretty close to each other.
Tell us the parties you guys have.
And he was sitting next to him on a flight, and Spieth had this spreadsheet out, and he was like trying to figure out, what events he was going to play in, what money he was going to earn, all this different stuff. So he was like, I think from a really young age, just very mature about planning stuff out. And obviously he didn't fly commercial anymore, but he was taking it like a 33-year-old would take it, and not like a 19-year-old should be taking it, Right. And so that story always stuck with me, of just like his maturity from early on. And I think it's, part of the reason that led to him having so much success over those first couple of years.
Yeah, that's what we say about Victor and Colin too. Like when we talk to Colin, it's like he's 35 years old and he's been on tour for a decade. It's really
which matters.
And you hope he can kind of keep that, but also kind of the ignorance along the way. I am down a wormhole right now, Kyle, on youngest PGA Tour players of all time. Do you even want to fathom a guess at this?
Well, I remember Spieth being the youngest since somebody in like 1921, but I can't remember who it was.
Okay, so this isn't necessarily winners. This is just, I guess, they've played an event.
Okay.
Don Dunkelberg at the Dunkelberger. Apologies, Don. The 1937 Chicago Open was 11 years old, 11 months, and 10 days. That's not a man. That's a child playing on the PGA Tour.
Yeah, my son will be 11 in like 2.5 years.
Well, get him ready.
He can't even the par 3 course is difficult for him. That's crazy. I mean, the kid from China that played the Masters was 14. That's underrated, by the way. That's
Tuanlang.
He made the cut at 14 at Augusta.
That's stupid. That's insane.
That's so stupid. I feel like we as much as it ever gets talked about, it can't be talked about enough.
Number 2 is Michelle Wie when she played the 04 Sony Open. 14 years, 2 months, 29 days. Pretty cool. That's nuts. That's
crazy. I think did she almost make the cut?
I don't know. I feel like she was close, right? I don't remember. The Open Championship at Birkdale, KP. That is the divider. Did she make the cut? Are you looking it up?
Yeah, I couldn't find it.
I'll look. The Birkdale is like the separator of eras for Jordan Spieth, right? It's the selling his soul to the devil to get the claret jug. You've described his back nine moment there as the greatest of golf Twitter ever. And
yeah, that was fun.
And then starts the drought. So let's talk about Birkdale, which I think we both understand to be Jordan Spieth being able to use the Spiethian creativity, the situation where he just ices Kuchar. I mean, it's just the whole thing was so Spieth-esque, and then he gets it done, and then that starts the drought. Is like there's something I love about that kind of symmetry.
Yeah, there was. So everybody should watch all of the Chronicles of a Champion Golfer on everybody who's done it, because they're tremendous, and they get basically the premise is that they interview guys sitting next to the claret jug, and for some reason there's something gets drawn out of them when they're sitting next to that trophy, and they turn the lights on. Rory's is unbelievable, and I remember in Spieth's he had this amazing quote where he said early on in the final round in 2017 at Birkdale, which, by the way, Birkdale, if you go look at the winners there, it is some gams, some grown ass men. I mean, Palmer won there.
I did not know what that meant. Thank you for that. Some gams. I like that. I'm going to use that.
You can look up who else won there, but I think I want to say either Player or Hogan. No, not Hogan. I don't know. It's a who's who list. It's really incredible. But he said early on that he was feeling, and I want to jump back to the Masters here right after this, but he was feeling the weight of the 16 Masters early on in the final round in 17 at the Open. And he told Michael Greller, and he was just like, I don't like, I'm thinking some things that I shouldn't be thinking right now. And you're like, oh my gosh, like this is crazy. Like that he would admit that, and he did. I mean, the was it 13 where he hit the ball over by the equipment trucks?
Yeah, I don't
and
know why
driving
I was
range
thinking
and
it was
everything?
15. It might have been 13.
I think it was 13.
Yeah.
And that was just like this all time.
Yeah.
I mean, it was just, it was, I don't know that he can ever do anything that is more Spieth than that last hour and a half or whatever it was. From there to, he birdied the next hole, and then he had to go get that. I mean,
Yeah.
Kuchar played the last 6 in like 1 under and just got stomped on. And you're like, what? And I'll never forget. So 2 things. One, Kuchar's wife had come over for the final round,
Right.
maybe earlier, and she went up to Spieth and said something like, "We're so happy for you, and I'm so proud of you." And you're like, "Oh my gosh!" Like this was. It becomes clear at major championships that when guys are either getting like their only chance to win one or maybe their last chance. And to me, that seemed like it was Kuchar's kind of last good chance to win a major. And for his wife to say that to Spieth was like, I thought that was really meaningful. And then in the Chronicles of a Champion Golfer, Spieth says something like, you don't realize it at the time that's going to go away. You're not going to be number one. You're not going to win for a while. And the fire just burns even hotter to get it back. And so I think he comes off sometimes as more measured than a Tiger, and he is, but I think inside all of the best ones, like they just have such a desire to be great, to be like singularly great. And I think his is a little more hidden than most, but I think he has that inside of him. And that, I mean, that was probably definitely my favorite final round of a major I've ever covered, even though I was just watching on TV. I mean, the go get that is just all time. And he played the 13th hole, took like 40 minutes.
Yeah.
And it was, the USGA would have had to like reconstruct itself if that was at a US Open because of all the rules that were being challenged. And it was completely insane, but also, like I said, kind of the apex of who Spieth is.
It is kind of interesting to think by what Jordan said there, having a taste of being the best player in the world, having a taste of being on the mountaintop and no longer being on the mountaintop almost feels worse than never getting to the mountaintop, right? It's like, it feels different. Like you don't have it anymore. I could imagine the demons that very much begin to crawl in when you start and he obviously didn't know at the time, but like a 1,300-day stretch without hoisting a trophy.
Yeah, I've talked to I haven't talked to Spieth directly about it, but I've heard that people are kind of around him are like, "Yo, like there were some dark days." Like
I believe,
and
that.
I think he always stayed pretty upbeat about it and pretty just like, "Oh yeah, we're grinding, we're good." But I think there were some days where it was like, I don't know, dude. Like I don't, and you, that's what you would expect. Think about the PGA in 2020 when he was on the range and Cameron McCormick's got like the cell phone and they're like, there's just a lot going on. And you're like, I don't know how this is going to go over the next couple of years. So it was good to obviously see him bounce back at the beginning of 2021.
Here are the GAMs. Open Championship winners at Birkdale. You mentioned a couple. Who did you name? Palmer, I think you said.
Palmer?
Yep, 61. No, here we go.
Trevino?
Yes. Peter Thompson twice. Arnold Palmer.
Okay.
Trevino. Johnny Miller. Tom Watson. Ian Baker Finch. Mark O'Meara. Patty Harrington. Jordan Spieth.
It's a good list.
It's a great list.
Yeah, it's really good. I'm trying to find that quote from Spieth from that
Palmer won 1,400 pounds when he won it in 1961. A little bit of a pay raise since then.
That's hilarious. Yeah, I can't find it. I'll send it to you later on. But it's
that.
such a great quote.
I've not
from
heard
him.
that before. That's pretty interesting.
Yeah, he's very open in it.
I watched it. I don't remember that, which is shocking because I would have, like, when you said it, it caught my attention. So I'll have to go back and rewatch it. 1,351 days. That's the time between the wins. There were stretches he didn't even get close. KP 6 podiums in 84 starts during the drought. He finally breaks through at the 2021 Valero, which I can only imagine felt like a billion-pound weight coming off of his shoulders.
For sure. I found the quote, by the way. He said, I had been through the demons and back, and it was done. That he was talking about the 16 Masters at that point. Oof. Then he said, the fire burns just as deep. It was unknown back then. Now I know what it was like. I know the feeling of what it's like when you're on top of the golf world. When you have it, it's special. And when you lose it, you want it even more.
Oh, God.
Isn't that good?
I am like, I've got goosebumps here. Like, that's so, like, it's so good. Who's, like...
It's really good. You need to go. I'm going to make my wife watch it with me tonight. It's fantastic.
I have Armina watching the Drive to Survive. She is not thrilled about it.
Oh, she doesn't like it?
I don't know. I think it takes, well, I had to start on season 1 because, like, I actually had never seen it before. So I had to start at season 1. So we're, like, in the middle of season 1 right now. And I don't know. I'm not sure she's buying into the storylines.
Okay. So my wife, the same thing, and season 1 is good, and she was kind of like, yeah, it's okay, but then season 2 she was like, this is awesome. Okay. So have her hang in until the start of season 2 because it gets a lot better.
Okay.
Which is what everybody says about a TV show.
That's true. Yeah. What's the only show that I think if they ended it after season 1 it would have been the best show ever? Homeland. Have you seen Homeland?
I have not seen Homeland.
Oh, if it was just one season and they tweaked the ending just a bit, it would be the greatest season of television ever created. It's unbelievable.
I think most shows it's like seasons 2 through 4, and then you need to chop off 1 and anything after 4.
Right. Yeah. Homeland.
Because that's like that's your good stuff. Texas Open.
Yes.
I was surprised he didn't show more emotion after he won.
Yeah, I think that's what we were kind of waiting for, right? And it never really came through.
He was trying hard not to, and his wife obviously was bawling, and that was sweet.
That was the first time since they'd been married that he had won, right?
Yeah,
I think so.
Yeah. Which I don't know if I've ever told this story publicly, but I remember I was at Colonial in like 2013 or 14, and there was a rain delay, and I was in like this covered area, and everybody was kind of jammed in there. This was before Spieth was Spieth, but I knew who he was. I knew who Michael Greller was, and Greller was in there talking to another caddy about how just how much like Spieth was going on about his girlfriend at the time. Just he's like, that's all she talks about, and that kind of stuff. And like knowing what I know now, it's a lot funnier than it was at the time because I thought it was just a caddy talking about. And now I'm like, oh, that's one of the more famous couples in the sports world that he was talking about there. But the thing I'll remember about the Texas Open, obviously Resurrection Easter Sunday, but he. Going up 18, he hits that second shot, the par on the par 5 there, and he almost like pulls it into, I think out of bounds is over there, if I'm not mistaken, on the left hand side of 18. And I was thinking about how like it was emblematic of just the whole journey, because even when it was like, okay, he's gonna win this tournament, he kind of teased you like, no, I'm actually gonna make a triple here and lose this tournament, and that was just such a perfect way for him to win it. And it made him, I mean, he played so well at the beginning of 2021. Everybody looks at the win,
right? But
it was really from basically Phoenix on, where he was the best iron player in the world. He was probably top 3 tee to green, top 5 tee to green. And so going into that Masters last year, which he could have won if he would have putted better. He became the favorite, and everybody was like, "Whoa!" And I'm like, "No, that's actually like what should be happening here, because one, he's awesome at Augusta, and two, he's been really, really good, even though he hasn't gotten the trophy, even though he hadn't won a trophy in the first 3 months until the Texas Open."
Yeah, it exactly right. He adds another one just a couple of weeks ago at the RBC Heritage, and KP, now it's like, where are we? Right? He's the 9th ranked player in the world. He's now won once in each of the last 2 years. Every time we go to Augusta National, he's going to be one of the favorites. Probably every time we go to an Open Championship, he's going to be one of the favorites. If you told me he doesn't win again for another 1,300 days, I'd be like, yeah, that makes sense. And if you told me he won 3 more times this year, I'd be like, yeah, that makes sense. Like, I have zero idea about the state of Jordan Spieth currently and what it looks like moving forward.
And that's part of the fun.
That's the thing. It's like you're on a roller coaster, but you can't see the track either, and you have no idea where you're going.
Yeah, that's why the FDA has not approved this drug. I don't know, man. Like, RBC was weird because he drove it great, but he didn't putt well. This actually is the season where I can figure him out the least, because there were seasons, obviously, 14 to 17, he was really good, and the putting gets all the attention, but he was a great iron player and a pretty slightly above average driver. He was fine. He was good enough. And then 18 to 20, he putted well, at least, I think 2 of those years, just kind of out of his mind because he had to. And then everything else was kind of a mess, especially driver. And then 21, it was almost back to like the 2016 type Spieth. He was actually playing better going into the Open last year than he was going into the Open the year he won it in 2017. And then this year, this year is the least that I understand him, because he's driving it really well, and everything else is kind of stinky. Like, he's not putting well. He might be the worst on tour from like 3.5 feet, other than his playing partner Will Zalatoris at times here in Dallas. I don't know what to make of him, and I think even more importantly, I don't know what to do with him historically, because I think that, like, do you think that he's so Arnold Palmer won all of his majors in like a 5-year span, from like 27 to 33, 6-year span, something like that. And I think there's a case to be made that that's what happened to Rory. Mm-hmm. I think there's a case to be made that that's what Brooks did. Mm-hmm. And I think there's a case to be made that that's what Spieth has done. I think what Phil has done over the course of his career is really underrated, because he's won for 30 years and he's spread his majors out over a long period of time.
Right.
Which is really hard to do, because I think you can catch a heater in like a year or 2 years or whatever, get a couple breaks, and they seem to kind of bunch up. Padraig Harrington did that, where he won all 3 in 2 years. And so I think the big question for me with Spieth is he going to be, I think he's going to be competitive on the PGA Tour until he's 40, but is he going to be a winner of majors for a long period of time? And I genuinely don't know the answer to that question. I think he will be, because I still think that there's, like, if you win a major at 21 and 3 by 25, we just don't have historical precedents that you're going to be anything but like an all-time great. But that's also a small sample size, because there's not that many guys that have done it. So I don't know. Where do you stand on him winning majors?
God, I think that, I think it's most likely that he probably never wins another one, right? And that's not because of, I would say that about Rory. I would say it about Justin. I would say it about basically everybody, just because there's only 4 a year, there's so many good guys, and there's going to continue to be an injection of new, younger, really good players as our current crop of superstars continues to get older. And there really is only, like, Phil is kind of really one of the few of this era that has won later in his career, won major championships later in his career. So it's bizarre because even if he wins 1.5 PGA Tour events a year, but never wins another major championship, I think that will, I don't want to say hurt his legacy, but it might be his legacy, KP. But I also think his legacy is dependent on what Rory does and what Brooks does. Because if Rory only has all the major championships bunched up and Brooks only has them all bunched up, it's like, okay, that's what we're seeing now. That's the modern game. If Rory wins 2 more in the next 2 years and Brooks wins 2 more and Spieth never wins another one, like that will then be a knock on Spieth, which is all entirely unfair, but that is what I believe to be true.
Yeah, it's a really good point about those other guys. He's kind of had a Rory-ish career, right? In terms of elite at 21, 22, wins his majors early. Rory had that weird, 2013 season where he was pretty bad when he changed to Nike equipment. Was it 2013? Yeah,
I think so.
Because that was the year between his majors. He won PGA in 2012 and then Open and PGA in 2014. So 2013 was his bad year. And Spieth had a little bit of that. So I don't know. I don't know. I'm looking at Data Golf right now. His top comparables at age, 28, are Fred Couples.
Okay.
It's pretty good. Ricky Fowler.
Oh, boy.
Patrick Reed.
Okay.
Daniel Berger.
Oh, boy. Okay.
Davis Love III. Charles Howell. Phil Mickelson. Stuart Sink. So there's a lot of different ways that can go.
Yeah, there are a lot of different ways that can go, is for sure. That's like there are like 7 paths there that are all completely different. I love that.
I think I struggle with Spieth because I think that he has a innate desire for greatness that maybe Rory has to like convince himself of sometimes. Right? Like that's what we talk about with Rory, is he kind of has to talk himself into desiring greatness, which sounds weird, but I think it's true. And then, but coupled with that, Spieth has an intense desire for like this very private life. Like he's not out and about here in Dallas. He is not, like he is very like doing his own thing. And I wonder if he just gets burned out by the circus of professional golf now, with how much is required of him, by how much he has to do, by all his commitments. You know, it's just, I wonder that about all these guys. And so I don't know. I struggle to kind of reconcile those two things with each other, because I do think he has a fire, but I don't know that that fire is enough to overcome like just being beaten down by all this other stuff around him. I mean, he's got all these massive sponsors and all these obligations and stuff. And so I'm curious to see how it goes in his 30s. I think if and when he wins more majors, I think the Open is actually his best venue. I mean, they're all different venues, but I think that's his best spot. Everybody looks at Augusta, and he's been great there, obviously, and should have like 3 Masters. But I think the Open is where he really thrives. And that hit me last year at Royal St. George's when he was talking about, he's like, listen, I love coming here because I can be creative. I don't have to hit stock driving range shots. I can, like, some of his crazy stuff works better there, I think. And I think mentally he's able to kind of fasten himself in ways that other guys just tend to eject.
It goes back to he does not play TrackMan golf, right? He does not fly it to a number. No is not. It's just like, I see the pin over there. I'll just saw off this like 5-iron and see what happens. Like I can just tap into it.
He's so good at it. Yeah. Who do you think better career right now, Koepka or Spieth?
Right now, it's got to be Spieth, right? 3 majors and more wins. And he's younger, isn't he? Is Brooks is what? Is Brooks 30 yet?
I think Brooks is like 31.
I thought he was 31 too. He's 32. So Spieth is also 4 years younger.
That's a lot. Spieth is still young.
Yeah, that's crazy.
Spieth is 5 years younger than Ricky Fowler, which is crazy. I let me find this. I did when did I do this? I think I did it right before I went on vacation. I did OWGR winning percentage. Here it is. So this is percent of OWGR events won of the top 12 guys in the world. So this is for their careers. It doesn't count like Zurich because that's not an OWGR event, but it does count Tour Championship, Shadow Leaderboard.
And it would count anything that they played in Europe.
Right. Or Olympics or anything like that. Okay. So this is OWGR winning percentage of the top 12 guys. Scheffler's at 6%, 6.1. Rahm at 9.4. That's gone up because he won. So I think he's at 10 now. Morikawa's at 8, which is a lot. Cam Smith's at 2.4. Cantlay at 4.2. Hovland, your boy, 7.4.
Woo!
He wins a lot.
He wins a lot.
Rory's at 7.8, which is mega impressive because he's done it for 13 years.
Played all the biggest events over that long of a period is kind of bonkers.
Yeah. JT's at 6.8, which is pretty impressive, even though he's kind of fallen off wins-wise over the last 2 years. Spieth is at 6.6, so he's basically the same as JT.
Yeah.
A little bit below Rory. DJ's at 7.6, again, super impressive because he's 38 years old. Sam Burns is at 3.5 and Xander's at 3.7. So Spieth is the 6th highest, but Hovland's a little bit like sample size is small, and Morikawa's sample size is pretty small as well, and Rahm's. So I think Spieth's number of 6.6 I think it's pretty impressive. I don't. Obviously, it's gone down a lot. I think it was at 12 earlier.
Yeah, I mean, he went 84 starts without one. So
right,
consecutively.
So I don't know. I think that, and this is what I got a little concerned about after RBC Heritage is this just who he is? Where it's like, okay, he'll win and then he'll contend in 2 majors and then he'll fall off for 7 months and then he'll contend in another major and then a year later he'll win. Because like that'll be fine, and that's a good career. It's a career that a lot of guys would love to have, but it doesn't feel as special as what we thought he was going to be early on.
Okay, that's the takeaway, because what you described is an awesome career, and you're right. There are guys who would love to fall off for 7 months a year, find a win, contend at a couple of major championships, and be smitten, but because that's not the what we thought from the meteoric rise, and it's not these expectations that we put on a guy that as you mentioned, has a ton of sponsors, has a ton of obligations. It doesn't feel good enough, but that very much is a great career if he does that for 10 years.
Yeah, I think it's hard because, and we do this in single events where our takeaway, like if a guy plays bad in round 1 and then great in round 4, we remember the most recent thing.
Yep.
And we're like, oh, he's got a ton of momentum, even though he could have shot the same score. And if you flip the how the rounds went, we say, oh, he's not playing very well. So well, he shot the same score, right? And I think with Spieth's career, and I think DJ has actually benefited from this because he is sort of like always gotten like incrementally better over the course of his career. And for somebody like Spieth, and to an extent Rory, they're always fighting the expectation that they had when they were, I mean, Rory said it this week. He's like, the best golf I've ever played is when I was 22 and I played the US Open at Congressional. And you're like, man, that's great. It's a little bit of a bummer because I want to see you play your best golf at 33
and
or
he's been
35.
And he's been chasing that for a dozen years.
Right. And so it almost feels like, even though, like, if Spieth would have flipped his career around, think about the conversation we'd be having right now if his career was flipped around, where he struggles early on, and then he figures it out, and then the last 2 years he's winning 3 majors. We'd be like, oh, this is unbelievable. This is going to be amazing.
Scotty Scheffler is the micro version of that, where it kind of took him a while to get started. Now he's rattled off 4. And now we're like, this guy might be the greatest player to ever live. Like, we don't know what's going to happen. That's what we would be saying. And okay, so I'm a big, and we can get out of here soon. But what's the guy who used to be the GM for the 76ers during Trust the Process? Why am I blanking on it? Sam Hinkie. Okay. Sam Hinkie. Okay. He had all these weird ideas, and I loved every single one of them, where he would like he'd go into scouting and be like, "Oh, you're watching game film on LeBron James. Why are you watching the game in order? Like, why are you watching the first quarter and then the second quarter?" And what he ended up doing was he had somebody just slice up all the plays, like remove the time on the clock and all that stuff from the corner, and like just watch the plays. Like, the order doesn't matter. Like, what do you see on this? Because you're being biased based on the order that you're seeing this stuff in.
Yeah.
And I was like, this guy's brilliant. I love this guy.
That's so good. And it's true. And it's human nature to do that. Like, we remember only the most recent thing. That's just how we're wired. That's just how we're built. But it is unfortunate for guys' careers who, I think, especially like Spieth to an extent, but I think especially Rory, where it's like, dude, what's wrong with Rory? And it's like, well, what if he had won one major when he was 22 and one when he was 25 and one when he was 29 and one when he was 33? And we'd be like, oh, this is so good. Like, this is the best. But because it came in like one cluster, and so much of that is luck, right? Where it just falls your way for 3 weeks in the summer of 2014. And, that's golf. And I do think that's why, like, again, I'll argue that what Phil did over the, like, extending that out is super impressive, because it's really, really, really hard to do. And even more so in 2022 or 2021 when he won the PGA. So all that to say, like, I actually don't think Spieth is done winning majors. I think he gets to 4 or 5, but I also wouldn't be surprised if that was it, if he stayed at 3 for the rest of his career. I hope not. That would be a huge, I mean, think about telling yourself in 2017 at Birkdale that was the last major.
Yes. And I hope he does, just for the state of the game, and he's a superstar and everything else that comes along with it. I hope he's not done. I hope he's got a lot more winning to do.
And either way, it'll be entertaining. So
the Phil Mickelson deep dive that we'll have to do at some point will be like a 10-parter. This Jordan Spieth one could be as well. But KP, I appreciate you coming on. I appreciate you sharing some thoughts on Jordan Spieth. Any final thoughts before we get out of here?
No, we talked very briefly about the Masters. I think my favorite memories of him are actually from Augusta, which we didn't totally get to. So maybe we'll have to do that as a separate one, but I'll never forget, actually, probably my favorite memory is 2016. So I was standing on 12 when he hits it in the water, and I wish I could recreate the sound that was made on the golf course when he hit it in the,
or by like
no by everybody when he hit it in the water a second time, because I've never heard anything like it. I've never heard anything since then that was similar. I was standing with Kevin Van Valkenburg of ESPN.com, and we were just like, it was almost shock over just like, it was almost like the Truman Show, where you're like watching like people like this thing play out, and you're like, I don't think this is real, but also like it might be real. Like, but the shot that I'll actually remember came because I think he birdied 13. I think he birdied 14. I think he parred 15, and then he hit a shot on 16 to that pin that we were behind the tee box on 16, and I grabbed KVV's shirt as he hit it, and I said, that's going in. That's a 1. And it went like 2. It almost hit the stick, and it went, and the pitch mark was like right by the pin. But the problem was, it's that pin that is obviously middle left, and it went a little bit past it, and so he had this downhill putt, and he had no chance to make it. So the dream kind of died then when he didn't make a birdie on 16. But he's just. And he did the same thing at Birkdale, right? When he almost made the ace on 14 after making the best bogey of all time on, I think it was 13. And he's just that's where I'm at with his career of like, as soon as I think he's cooked, he continues to keep coming back. And that's the fire that he was talking about earlier that I think burns in him on like it's not as prominent as it was with Tiger. You don't get the fist pumps and stuff like that, but I think it burns pretty deep. And I think that is probably the most compelling thing about him, that he just keeps bouncing back. And I hope he continues to do so for the rest of his career.
Yeah, that's the magic beans. The fire is the magic beans that we joke about, and he's able to kind of summon these things that are unsummonable, and he's able to pull it off. It's amazing.
Yeah. And that's not true of all superstars, right?
No.
I think you look at a lot of guys we see this in basketball a lot, guys that are 7 foot, they just play basketball because they're 7 foot,
right.
you know? And I think Spieth plays golf because he loves playing golf. And that's the Phil part of him, I think. And I think it's really compelling.
KP, Kyle Porter, thank you, brother. Appreciate you hopping on. You can find Kyle on Twitter at Kyle Porter CBS. You can find me at RickRunGood. This has been another episode of 300 Yards to Unknown. Catch you next time.